December 10th. 1942. Over the Bay of Biscay. Ice rattles across the plexiglass nose of a B-24D Liberator as it claws through the winter sky. Inside the bombardier's compartment, Lieutenant Frank Delaney wipes the frost from his astigmatism-thick glasses and mutters through chattering teeth. Damn thing feels like it's held together with chewing gum. The aircraft shudders again. One of its Davis wing mounts has been vibrating for the past hour. Above him, the pilot, Captain Lewis Hart. Radio's back to base. That engine 3 is running rough. Oil pressure dropping. Outside, squalls of Atlantic wind slam against the slab-sided fuselage. The crew hears the metallic groan, the sound every Liberator crewman learns to fear: thin aluminum flexing under strain. Then the intercom crackles. Navigator to pilot, German radar contact to the south. 2:88 seconds vectoring in. Delaney feels the familiar knot in his stomach. The Liberator is fast and carries a brutal payload, but it's temperamental. Built by disparate factories, some in California, some in Michigan, some in San Diego. Every ship seems to behave differently. Some fly like stags. Some fly like bricks. Some have misaligned turrets. Others leak fuel from rivet seams. The crew knows the truth whispered across 8th Air Force units. No two B-24 seconds are the same. They aren't built on one line. They aren't built with one process. They aren't built with one master blueprint. And when young American airmen fly into German-held Europe with a bomber that vibrates, misfires, rattles, or drifts, it costs lives. Back in the States, thousands of miles away from Delaney's freezing nose compartment, one man is pacing through a cavernous, empty factory before dawn, frustrated, determined, and muttering to himself as snow taps against the enormous windows. Charles Emil Sorensen, Danish-born industrial genius and chief production planner for Ford Motor Company. It is here, inside the soon-to-be-completed Willow Run plant, still smelling of fresh concrete and cold steel, that he stops and looks out over the vast, unsorted space. He imagines the impossible A-bomber complex. Rivet tight. War-ready, not built piece by piece in scattered workshops, but built like a car. Sorensen presses his hand against a blueprint on a drafting table. His breath fogs the cold air. Around him, the plant is silent. But in his mind, he hears motion, pneumatic hammers firing in sync, cranes swinging overhead, assemblers snapping parts together with the precision of an orchestra, a bomber moving slowly, deliberately across the floor, growing in form hour by hour. His engineers have told him, it can't be done. The B-24 isn't a car. Its tolerances are too tight. Its fuselage is too long to move on a single line. Its wings are too broad to attach by overhead crane. Its internal cables, hoses, and bomb racks require dozens of separate crews. And yet, a memo from Washington lies on his desk. America must build thousands. Speed matters more than perfection. Sorensen taps the document with one finger. The Army Air Forces don't need a handful of good bombers. They need rivers of them. He clenches his jaw. If the United States enters 1943 with slow production, the strategic bombing campaign will stagger. If the Liberator can't be built faster, the U-boat pens, the ball-bearing plants, the Ruhr smelters, all will remain untouched. He whispers to himself, there has to be a better way. He looks up at the rafters, and he sees it. Not the rafters themselves, but the parallel lines, a simple concept that Henry Ford used to revolutionize automobiles. A jig, a master frame, a skeleton into which every future aircraft will fit exactly, a guide that eliminates human error, a system that forces every part into perfect alignment, a tool that makes mass production possible, a bomber built like a Model T. As snow falls outside, and the wind whistles through the half-finished factory, Sorensen picks up a pencil and begins to sketch. A single sentence comes to him, one that will soon reshape the largest aircraft plant on Earth, make the plane fit the jig. His breath fogs the cold air. Around him, the plant is silent. But in his mind, he hears motion, pneumatic hammers firing in sync, cranes swinging overhead, assemblers snapping parts together with the precision of an orchestra, a bomber moving slowly, deliberately across the floor, growing in form hour by hour. His engineers have told him, it can't be done. The B-24 isn't a car. Its tolerances are too tight. Its fuselage is too long to move on a single line. Not the jig fit the plane. 3 hours later, as dawn breaks over the frosted fields of Ypsilanti, Michigan, he rolls up his sleeves, calls his foreman, and issues the order that will set the industrial world spinning. We build the B-24 inches, one continuous line, and we do it my way. Outside, workers begin to file into the enormous factory. Inside, history begins to shift. January 4th, 1943. Willow Run, Michigan, pre-dawn. He has consumed every waking thought circling the same question. How do you mass-produce the most complex bomber in the world? He arrives at a cleared section of the floor where a crude wooden frame stands, the very first mock-up of his revolutionary idea. A fuselage jig. A rigid, towering structure of beams, clamps, guide rails, and alignment pins. To most people it looks like a jungle gym built by madmen, but inside this skeleton is a revelation, a space where every future B-24 fuselage will be forced down to the last rivet to match the same exact shape. Sorensen runs his hand along the cold wood and steel. No more teams improvising with hand-fitted parts. No more misaligned skins or sloppy rivet lines. No more. Every plane is different. This jig will make every bomber identical. And identical machines can be mass-produced. His lead engineer, Harold Janes, approaches, rubbing his eyes. Charlie, this thing is enormous. We'll never get the tolerances tight enough with a wooden frame. It'll flex. Sorensen shakes his head. It won't flex. Because we're going to build it again. In steel. And then we're going to build 50 more. Janes starries. 50 jigs for one bomber, that's insane. Sorensen cracks a slow grin. It's only insane until the first bomber rolls off the line. Days later, a team of riveters wheels in the forward fuselage sections from Consolidated Aircraft half-assembled skins, ribs, and bulkheads. They hoist the pieces into the jig. The frame groans. Several clamps don't align perfectly. A mechanic mutters, "Told you. The Liberator was never meant to be built this way." Sorensen steps forward. Adjust the clamps. Don't force the part. Make the metal obey the frame. The workers try again. This time, something remarkable happens. Bulkheads that normally require hours of shimming snap perfectly into position. Rivet holes that previously needed hand reaming align with millimeter precision. The skin plates lie flush against the curved longerons. The men stop working. They look at one another. Janes exhales slowly. It fits. Sorensen nods. Once say. Now imagine 100 stations doing this at the same time. By mid-January, Willow Run becomes a controlled chaos of sparks, cutters, and welders. Sorensen orders construction crews to tear up sections of floor and rebuild them at slight angles so the entire bomber line can snake around the building's support pillars in one continuous flow. Mechanics stare in disbelief at the new layout drawings. 120 assembly stations. A mile-long line. A complete B-24 every hour. The impossible. But Sorensen knows something they don't. In 1913, Henry Ford reduced automobile production from 12 hours to 90 minutes, with a simple idea: to move the machine. Not the men. Now, it's time to move bombers. Ford sends in its best specialists, men who once built Model A's and tractors. Aircraft engineers from Consolidated are horrified when they see them. These men don't even know what an aileron is. One complains. Sorensen steps between them. They don't need to. They know how to build things the same way every time. That's what wins wars. He points to the jigs rising across the factory floor, some for wings, some for tail sections, some for engine mounts. Each one a metal cage. Each one a master template. Each one an industrial miracle. February 1943. The Army Air Forces sends Colonel Raymond Stetson to inspect progress. He walks through the enormous hall with a mix of skepticism and awe. The plant is still incomplete. But the vision is unmistakable. An assembly line unlike anything the world has seen. Workers swarm over a fuselage like ants, each performing a single choreographed task. Cranes glide overhead, lowering sub-assemblies into waiting jigs. The smell of hot rivets, machine oil, and freshly cut aluminum fills the air. Stetson watches as a crew installs a bomb bay framework in record time. Everything fits without struggle. He turns to Sorensen. Where are the fitting crews? The shim teams? The Finnish carpenters? Sorensen folds his arms. We don't need them. The jig is the blueprint. Stetson runs a hand over the perfectly aligned frame. You're telling me you can produce B-24 seconds? Like automobiles? Sorensen meets his gaze. No. Colonel, I'm telling you we can produce them faster. Stetson slowly removes his cap. God help Hitler. Late one night, under harsh fluorescent lights, the first complete fuselage emerges from the final jig, a gleaming aluminum shell. Perfect from nose to tail. Workers gather around it in silence. Someone whistles. Another whispers. She looks like she flew here herself. Sorensen doesn't smile. He's too tired. Too focused. This is just one fuselage. He needs hundreds. And he needs them now. As he walks away, hands shoved into his coat pockets, he murmurs to himself. Next, we attach the wings. He stares up at the overhead cranes, massive yellow machines spanning the width of the assembly hall. If the fuselage was step 1, the wings will be step 2. And the wings are even bigger. March 2nd. 1943. Willow Run, Michigan. The morning fog hangs low inside the massive assembly hall as workers wheel in the first full-length B-24 wing panels. Monstrous 110-foot structures that dwarf the men guiding them, even resting on transport dollies. The wings look impossibly large. The Davis airfoil is thin, elegant, and unforgiving. Its tolerances are so tight that even a minor warp means lost efficiency or catastrophic failure in combat. A foreman, sleeves rolled past elbow grease, looks at the wings and mutters, "There's no way these damned things fit on a moving line." Other factories build wings horizontally in isolated rooms. They spend hours crawling inside cramped cavities, hand-adjusting cables. They align spars by eye. They stretch chalk lines across the floor and pray everything meets in the middle. But Willow Run cannot afford prayer. Willow Run needs precision. Willow Run needs speed. Willow Run needs a way to snap wings into place as easily as bolting doors onto a Ford sedan. Sorensen steps toward the towering wing jig. A monstrous metal ribcage rising 2 stories high. Newly installed by welders on triple shifts. It looks like the skeleton of some giant prehistoric beast. Its clamps stretch outward like claws. Harold Janes, holding a clipboard, stands beside him. Charlie. The engineers from Consolidated still insist you can't join a Davis wing this fast. They say the torque box needs hand fitting. Sorensen taps a gloved finger on the steel jig. Not anymore. The crane operator helmet dented. Cigarette dangling lowers the left wing panel toward the jig. The entire factory floor watches. Riveters stop mid-stroke. Welders lift their masks. Even the secretaries from the administrative offices line the guardrails above. The wing descends. 1 foot. 6 inches. 2 inches. A metallic click rings out as the first alignment pin slides into its guide socket. The workers freeze. Another inch. Click. A second pin locks in. The crane operator stares at Sorensen. Eyebrows raised. Sorensen raises his hand flat. Keep going. The wing settles into the cradle. Thunk. The final 2 guide rails fall into perfect alignment. No shimming. No cable stretched. No close enough. Perfect. Someone exhales a quiet holy hell, as if they're afraid the wing might hear them. Then the second wing is lowered. Same clicks. Same perfect fit. The entire fuselage and wing assembly, one of the largest aircraft structures in the world, now stands unified in the jig, like a pinned butterfly. A senior consolidated engineer, who had spent years building Liberators the old way, walks in circles around the assembly, touching rivet lines, measuring spar distances, tugging on torque cables. He finally looks at Sorensen. "Charlie, you've done the impossible." Sorensen shakes his head. "No. I've made it repeatable." By late March, the plant grows louder each week. Conveyor tracks hum. Cranes glide like obedient giants. Trucks unload mountains of subassemblies, oxygen systems, radios, hydraulic pumps, Norden sight housings, landing gear, struts. All of it flows into the jigs. A bomber no longer begins life as a scattered collection of parts. Now it begins as movement, a slow, steady march down a mile-long production artery. And with every meter the plane travels, more workers swarm over it. One team bolts in wiring harnesses. Another installs bomb bay doors. Another adds self-sealing fuel tanks. Another mounts the twin 50 caliber turret housings. It looks like chaos, but it is controlled, timed, choreographed. Like ballet in steel and aluminum, in early April, executives from Washington arrive again, this time with less politeness. A procurement officer, Major Wallace Keating, storms up to Sorensen in a whirlwind of frustration. "Your output numbers are unacceptable. We need bombers now. Not next year." Sorensen stands steady, coat smudged with aluminum dust. "Major, the jig's only finished installation last week. The line must be calibrated, trained. You don't crank out bombers the way you crank out sausage." Keating's eyes blaze. "No. Then why the hell are we working with a car company before Sorensen can respond?" A deafening roar rumbles across the factory. Every head turns. A complete B-24 silver, gleaming, perfect, slowly emerges from the final assembly station. Fresh from the paint shop. Sunlight glinting off Ford-built, stenciled under the cockpit. It is beautiful, symmetrical, straight, exact. A machine born not from improvisation, but from a jig. Workers cheer. Men whistle. Women clap. Major Keating's jaw hangs open. Sorensen places his hands gently behind his back. That is bomber number 47. Next week, we double production. But Sorensen knows the truth. A bomber without engines is a sculpture. And the B-24 isn't just any bomber. It relies on 4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasps. Each one, a masterpiece of supercharged mechanical engineering. They must be mounted perfectly, timed perfectly, wired perfectly, and the engine jigs still half-finished sit idle on the far side of the factory. Like sleeping titans waiting to be awakened. Sorensen walks toward them. Coat flapping in the draft from overhead ducts. One more breakthrough stands between him and true mass production. One more puzzle. One more chance to make the impossible real. He places a hand on the cold steel of the first engine jig and whispers to himself, "Next, we teach the engines to fall into place." April 18th. 1943, Willow Run Engine Bay. The scent of machine oil and hot steel saturates the air as Charles Sorensen steps into the engine assembly wing, the newest, noisiest, and most chaotic corner of Willow Run. 4 rows of half-completed Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasp engines rest on rolling stands, like mechanical beasts, waiting to be awakened. Sparks crackle. Torque wrenches snap. Air hammers thrum against the cylinder banks. Dozens of mechanics, some fresh off automobile lines, stare at the radial engines as if they are alien organisms. One man whispers to another, "Cars don't have this many valves in the whole damn engine." Another adds, These cylinders look like a porcupine swallowed a toolbox. Sorensen watches them struggle and knows the truth. If the engines cannot be built and mounted with factory precision, the entire assembly line dream collapses. A B-24 engine isn't merely bolted on, it is mated to the aircraft 14-cylinder double-row radial supercharger lines, accessory drive housings, flexible oil return lines, exhaust collectors, cowl flaps, throttle and mixture controls, fire suppression, plumbing, electrical harnesses, fuel injectors, carburetor linkages. Each engine demands hundreds of precise operations. The consolidated engineers, already skeptical of Sorensen's jigs, insist the engines must be installed by hand, measured, aligned, and adjusted by master airframe technicians. But Sorensen refuses to accept it. Engines aren't exceptions. Engines are just assemblies with more steps. Janes frowns. Charlie, an aircraft engine is not a Ford V8. Sorensen's eyes sharpen. Then we'll build a jig that treats it like one. 2 days later, Sorensen and a team of machinists unveil a prototype, a monstrous cradle-like fixture, big enough to swallow an entire twin Wasp. It is shaped not around the engine's exterior, but its mounting geometry hardpoints, bolt circles, cooling ring clearance, and cowling depth. A senior Pratt & Whitney advisor stares at the jig as if seeing blasphemy. You cannot just drop an R1830 into a frame like a transmission block. Sorensen circles the jig like a professor inspecting a prototype. Watch us. He signals to the crane operator. A chain rattle echoes through the engine bay as one of the gleaming radial engines rises into the air. Cylinders glinting in the shop lights. Workers hold their breath as the engine drifts above the jig. 6 feet. 4 feet. 1 foot. Then click. The first alignment cone slips into its socket. Clack. The rear mount ring seats itself. Thunk. The engine settles perfectly into place. Mechanics stare in disbelief. One whispers, "It fits like it wants to be there." Sorensen steps forward, brushing metal shavings from the jig's edge. No more guesswork. No more eyeballing. No more refitting. From now on, if the engine doesn't fit the bomber, then the engine is wrong. Within weeks, Willow Run transforms the engine installation process into a ballet of industrial precision. Engine arrives from subline, already jig-fitted. Overhead crane lifts the completed assembly. Fuselage section enters the engine station. A second jig clamps the nacelle into exact geometry. Engine mounts are slid forward on rails. Locking pins align automatically. 12 bolts are torqued simultaneously by synchronized wrenches. Fuel, oil, and ignition lines snap into standardized fittings. No shims. No delays. No senior mechanic deciding the fate of the aircraft. One foreman watches a complete engine mount in under 15 minutes and mutters, "It used to take us a day." The next day, it took us half a day. A week later, hell, now it takes us an hour. By early June, Willow Run is no longer a factory. It is a machine that builds machines. Engine jigs, wing jigs, fuselage jigs, tail jigs, control surface jigs, turret jigs. Everywhere frames within frames. Guiding hands that never tire. Never make mistakes. Never forget a measurement. Constructing a B-24 has gone from art to engineering to choreography to rhythm. And the rhythm gets faster every week. 3 planes per week. Then 10. Then 20. Then 50. Reporters visiting the factory are awestruck. One writes, "It is a cathedral of industry." Humming with the relentless certainty of a watchmaker. Sorensen doesn't read the article. He doesn't have time, because now finally the last obstacle stands before him. A continuous conveyor on which a bomber will roll. Inch by inch. From bare aluminum skeleton to 4-engined beast of war, it will be the longest, fastest aircraft assembly line in human history. And if it works, B-24 Liberators will roll off it every single hour. Sorensen walks to the end of the factory floor where the empty tracks lie waiting. He can see the future. Smell the hot metal. Hear the thunder of engines warming for their first test run. He places one palm on the steel rail and whispers, "Time to make the line move." June 29th. 1943. Willow Run Final Assembly Corridor. The factory floor vibrates not from machinery, but from the sheer anticipation of what is about to begin. Hundreds of workers line the catwalks. Mechanics lean against tool carts. Draftsmen, clerks, krana operators, riveters, foremen. Everybody has come to witness the birth of something insane. Something no nation has ever attempted. A mile-long assembly line for a 4-engined heavy bomber. Massive overhead cranes rumble into position. Amber warning lights wash the floor in a warm glow. Electric motors hum along the rails. The smell of burnt-in paint from the freshly laid conveyor tracks lingers in the air. At the head of the line, the very first unfinished B-24, just a skeletal frame of aluminum spars and bulkheads, waits like a sacrificial animal being offered to the gods of industry. Sorensen stands in front of it with a stopwatch in hand. Harold Janes steps beside him. "Charlie, if this doesn't work," Sorensen cuts him off. "It will." Janes swallows hard. "And if it doesn't," Sorensen doesn't look away from the bomber. "Then we build another line. And another. And another. Until it does." The signal horn blasts through the hall 3 long notes that echo up the steel pillars and into the rafters. The conveyor lurches forward. The bomber moves. Slowly. Awkwardly. Inches at first. But it moves. A cheer erupts across the plant. The unfinished fuselage rolls into the first station, a forest of jigs, cranes, and tool arms. Dozens of mechanics descend on it instinctively, each one performing a single motion practiced for weeks. A rivet team in blue aprons slams down the first row of fasteners. A wiring crew snakes bundles of color-coded cables into the fuselage spine. Hydraulic specialists snap pre-measured tubing into bulkhead brackets. Radio technicians bolt the foundations for the SCR-274 command set. A turret assembly team lowers a Martin 250 CE turret housing into the dorsal ring. The operation is so fluid that it looks rehearsed, except it isn't. It's the first time anyone has ever seen a bomber built like this. Sorensen checks his stopwatch. 8 minutes. He says. Yanis blinks. 8 minutes for the whole station. Sorensen corrects him quietly. 8 minutes ahead of schedule. Over the next days, the line develops something almost like a heartbeat. Every station has a job. Every job has a time. Every time has a purpose. The aircraft moves at 2 inches per minute, so slow the human eye barely perceives it, yet steady enough that workers can install components without pausing. A rivet team in blue aprons slams down the first row of fasteners. A wiring crew snakes bundles of color-coded cables into the fuselage spine. Hydraulic specialists snap pre-measured tubing into bulkhead brackets. Radio technicians bolt the foundations for the SCR-274 command set. A turret assembly team lowers a Martin 250 CE turret housing into the dorsal ring. The operation is so fluid that it looks rehearsed, except it isn't. Reporters, congressmen, generals, and foreign observers flood through Willow Run daily. They watch workers perform their specialized movements like monks, tending a sacred machine. One British officer whispers to a colonel beside him, "It's as though you've mechanized the act of creation itself." On July 14th, the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, tours Willow Run. He removes his spectacles as he gazes down the length of the line, eyes wide. "My God," he mutters. All this for one airplane. Sorensen stands beside him, hands behind his back. "No, sire. All this for 1,000. Stimson walks the line in complete silence. Workers barely notice him. They are too busy keeping rhythm with the moving fuselage. At Station 76, he stops and watches a dozen workers lower a complete interior assembly radio bench, navigator's desk, fabric-lined insulation, cable runs, Oxygen manifold into the fuselage in one smooth crane motion. Stimson whispers, "It used to take weeks." Sorensen answers simply, "It takes an hour now." August 3rd. 1943. The final assembly station. A gleaming B-24J, freshly painted in olive drab and neutral gray, rolls forward under its own weight for the first time. Its serial number 42-73417 is stenciled cleanly on the tail. Its nose art will be added later. Test pilot, Captain Roland Bud Gardner, climbs the ladder into the cockpit. He runs a hand across the throttle quadrant. The immaculate wiring bundles. The polished control column. He has flown dozens of Liberators. This one feels different. Tighter. Straighter. Balanced. Perfectly rigged. He can sense it. Ground crew attach tow bars. Clear the taxi path. And shout calls to one another. Gardner primes the engines. 1, 2, 3, 4, with a cough. A backfire. And a roar that shakes the hangar doors. The twin wasps come alive. 4 perfect circles of flame bloom in the exhaust collectors. The aircraft settles on its struts. Gardner gives a small nod of approval. Minutes later, as workers swarm to the windows of the test bay, the bomber rolls out into the sunlight. Engines thundering like a pack of lions. A voice on the PA system announces Willow Run B-24. Ready for flight test. Sorensen watches the bomber taxi away. Its wingtips gleaming. Yanus steps beside him. "You did it. Charlie. You really did it." Sorensen doesn't smile. He's still staring at the bomber disappearing across the airfield. "Not yet." He says quietly. "Not until one rolls off every hour." He turns back to the factory. Now, we scale it. September 12th. 1943. Willow Run, Michigan. Before dawn. The factory glows. Not with sunlight, but with electricity. Sodium vapor lamps hum from the rafters. Welding torches flare. Conveyor motors purr like living creatures. 1:04 M. Willow Run is awake because Willow Run never sleeps. Today, the plant is attempting something no aircraft factory has ever done. Not one bomber a day. Not one bomber every shift. One bomber every 60 minutes. A pace so insane that engineers from other plants call it Sorensen's folly. But Charles Sorensen, thick-shouldered, coat, dusty with aluminum filings, is walking briskly across the floor. Clipboard under his arm. Eyes sharp. He's not thinking about whether it's possible. He's thinking only about timing. Timing. And rhythm. He stops at Station 1, where the skeletal nose sections of 3 future B-24 seconds hang, suspended in early fog from the paint shop. Foremen gather around him. "Gentlemen," Sorensen says, "this is the day everything changes. Not for Ford. Not for Willow Run. For the war. No speech. No theatrics. Just fact." A loud buzzer echoes across the hall. Shift change. Hundreds of workers pour in. Lunch pails rattling. Thermoses clinking. Boot soles thumping the steel-gridded walkways. Sorensen flips his stopwatch. The wall clock above them ticks to 0500. The first fuselage rolls forward conveyor gears, clattering softly. Massive jigs locked in place. Sorensen checks the stride of the line. 2 inches per minute. Just as planned. He marches station to station. Checking alignment. Calibration. Machine readiness. At Station 17. A hydraulic press seals fuel lines. At Station 23. Electricians lace the main loom through the fuselage spine. At Station 34. The bomb bay doors are threaded onto their hinges. At Station 51. The tail turret ring is lowered by crane. At Station 66. Workers rivet the wing roots like a swarm of bees. At Station 83. Engines slide forward on rails with mechanical grace. Every team moves with the same quiet intensity, and slowly. like a great metal serpent. The Liberator grows, piece by piece, rivet by rivet, minute by minute. At 0541, a torque wrench jams at Station 47. A mechanic shouts for backup. The line cannot stop, ever. Stopping means losing the 1-hour cycle. 2 supervisors sprint forward. Sorensen watches silently. They swap the wrench. Torque séquence resume. A broken tool is flung aside like a battlefield casualty. The line never pauses. At 0607, a crane hesitates. Its operator misjudged a swing angle. Sorensen barks. Reset positioning jacks. Now the crew reacts instantly. Wing spar section drops the last 3 inches into perfect anchor points. The line continues. 6 seconds lost. Still within tolerance. At 0629, a radio unit fails inspection. A replacement one is rushed down the aisle by a bicycle courier weaving through the chaos. The inspector nods. Stamp approved. Still on schedule. By 0651. The test pilot crew arrives at the far end of the line. Standing beside the runway doors awaiting their ship. Inside, the final B-24 rolls toward completion. Its olive-drab skin gleams under the lights. Fuel tanks pressurized. Bomb racks armed only with practice loads. Turrets checked. Hydraulics tested. Contrôle surface trimmed. The only thing missing is the moment. Sorensen looks at his stopwatch. 58 minutes. He walks to the end of the line where the last 30 feet of track tilts slightly upward, allowing the bomber to roll out under its own weight. Workers gather. Even the normally stoic welding foreman wipes steel dust from his hands and stands on tiptoe to see. The bomber inches forward. Sorensen whispers, "Come on. Come on." 0, 6, 5, 9, 4, 8. The nose clears the final jig. 0, 6, 5, 9, 5, 2. Tail wheel crosses the yellow inspection line. 0, 6, 5, 9, 5, 9. The B-24 rolls free. 070000. A klaxon horn blares so loudly it rattles the rafters. A roar erupts cheers. Whistles. Shouts. Applause that echoes down the mile-long line. Someone shouts, "1 bomber an hour. We did it. Another Hitler's gonna feel this." The bomber gleams under the fluorescent lights. Crisp. Perfect. Identical to the one before it, because the jigs demanded perfection on its nose. Freshly painted in bold white stencil. The number reads, L24112. You've done it. Charlie. Jane says next to him, "You've beaten the clock." But Sorensen doesn't cheer. He doesn't clap. He only watches the completed bomber rolling toward the sunlight. Now, says quietly, we do it again. The second bomber rolls out at 0800. The third at 0900. By lunchtime, Willow Run has produced more Liberators than many Allied factories build in a week. A reporter calls it the industrial miracle of the war. A general calls it America's arsenal in motion. A German intelligence summary calls it terrifying. But to Sorensen, it's just the beginning. He returns to the middle of the line. Notes, adjustments. Outlines new improvements. Sketches modifications for faster rivet arms. And proposes additional wing jigs to cut minutes off the cycle. Because the line must move faster, always faster. Not because of pride, not because of ego, but because somewhere over the Atlantic, over the Ruhr, over Italy, over Ploesti, American boys are dying in machines that need replacements. And Sorensen intends to build those replacements before the enemy can shoot the old ones down. He stares across the factory floor, his industrial battlefield, and grips his clipboard until his knuckles whiten. Next target. He murmurs. 1 bomber every 55 minutes. October 21st. 1943. Willow Run. Michigan. Snow spits against the towering glass panes of the factory as the night shift marches in. Shoulders hunched. Breath steaming in the cold morning dark. Outside, the airfield is a maze of tire tracks and refrozen slush. Inside, the temperature is warm enough for men to sweat through their coveralls. The line is already moving. It never stops now. A completed B-24J rolls off the track at 0300. Another at 0400 and at 0500. A third emerges with the rhythmic precision of a heartbeat. It has been 39 days since Willow Run achieved the 1-hour miracle. And in those 39 days, the line has never missed a beat. In the cafeteria, a tired riveter named Carl Munson sips lukewarm coffee from a tin mug. He's been working the wing jig station for 62 nights straight. A young reporter from the Detroit Free Press approaches him. "Sir, what's it like building the same plane every hour?" Munson snorts. "You don't think about the hour. You think about the part, and you get damn good at that part." The reporter scribbles. Munson leans in. "You want to know the truth? We build bombers in our sleep now. My hands do half the work before my brain wakes up." Another worker adds, "We don't build liberators. We flow liberators." The reporter asks if they ever get tired. Munson shrugs. "The boys flying them are more tired than we are." By mid-November, Willow Run has doubled the number of engine jigs, tripled its electrical harness stations, and added 2 new turret-fitting units. The plant sprawls across the Michigan countryside like a metal city, its own fire department, its own power grid, its own shipping yard. Sorensen oversees it all with the same relentless energy. He walks 10 miles a day inside the factory. He speaks with every foreman by name. He adjusts jigs with his own hands. He rewrites workflow sheets at midnight. He eats lunch standing up against a filing cabinet. Harold Janes, exhausted, pale, coat dusted with aluminum grit, finally corners him. "Charlie, you have to sleep." Sorensen waves him off. "We're not here to rest. We're here to bury the Luftwaffe." December 7th. 1943. 0758 hours. The morning whistle blows. Workers gather along the mezzanine rails, their boots thudding on steel grating. Women from the wiring station have taken out small American flags. Mechanics lean against toolboxes. Crane operators kill their motors. Because this one is special. A B-24J, number 44-4-1052 glides down the incline of the final assembly track. Paint still tacky. Nose plexiglass, still smelling of solvents. Turrets freshly oiled. On its fuselage, hand-painted overnight in dark blue letters, 5000 from Ford. The crowd erupts. Sorensen stands with his arms folded, jaw tight. For the first time in months, he allows himself a small smile. Janes leans toward him. "You built more bombers in 1 year than Consolidated did in 3. Sorensen nods. "Once, and we're not done." When the engines start, thunder rolls across the hangar. Workers shield their ears. The bomber pushes forward, taxis into the freezing air, and lifts off like a steel giant awakening from slumber. Sorensen watches until the aircraft becomes a speck against the gray sky. Then he turns back to the line. "Let's get number 5. 001. Ready." By January 1944, Willow Run's liberators are everywhere. 10th Air Force over Burma, 15th Air Force over Italy, 7th Air Force over the Central Pacific, 8th Air Force over Germany, 9th Air Force. In tactical support, rolls a single Willow Run pilot writes home, "Every time we lose one, another appears like magic." We call them Sorensen's Thunderbirds. German intelligence notes, "We estimate American production is now beyond our capacity to counter. The Luftwaffe's fuel supplies shrink. Oil fields in Ploesti burn. Rail yards collapse under bombardment. Ball-bearing plants fall silent. The Ruhr becomes a cratered wasteland, and behind it all, far from any battlefield, Willow Run keeps moving. One bomber an hour. Every hour. Day after day. Night after night. Winter through summer. Thunderstorms through blizzards. A rhythm of war. A heartbeat of American steel. A line that never sleeps. June 28. 1945. Willow Run. The war in Europe has ended. The last B-24 rolls off the line at 1431. Workers stand quietly. No cheering. No whistle. Just silence, the kind that follows a long, brutal campaign. The bomber's number 42 to 99911. Its paint gleams. Its rivets shine. Its nose art reads simply, "End of the line." Sorensen runs a hand over its fuselage. Not pride. Not triumph. Just relief. Job's well done. He murmurs. The Willow Run line powers down. Lights dim. Motors cool. Crane hooks sway lightly in the still air. The factory exhales for the first time in years. In just 2.5 years. Ford's Willow Run plant produced 685 B-24 Liberators, the largest bomber production run in human history. It changed aviation. It changed industry. It changed the war. And it all began with one civilian. In a silent factory, on a snowy morning, whispering to himself, "Make the plane fit the jig." The rest was history.